Okay, so this might be the first video or not, depending on how we upload them, but I want to thank my friend Katie for joining me for this one. Welcome, Katie. Do you want to say something about yourself?
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm Katie, as Nina said, and I live in Minnesota in a very small town called Sleepy Eye. I started doing therapy in about 2020, so a few years ago. Um, and yeah, I'm excited to offer this to people who are looking to practice their English as therapists, or just to see how these different types of therapies play out.
Yeah, and as I said to you before we started recording, I read on the website of my training this morning that it says there we have an ethical obligation to stay up to date with all the new therapies and just to be as familiar as we can with different approaches because we're integrative therapists. So this is a two-in-one or a three-in-one for me where we get to record this and learn and people can practice their English. And you chose the first one, IFS. I'm
Yes,
excited.
yes.
So the client's presenting issue is that they struggle to ask their boss for time off. And let's read about how IFS would approach this client. So I'm going to be reading from a doc, and we can take turns to make it a little more engaging for people. And I'll try not to read too fast. So, in internal family systems, the focus is on understanding the internal parts of a person, which make up their internal system. These parts include protective, wounded, and exiled aspects of the self. The goal of therapy is to develop a relationship with these parts from a place of self leadership or self, which is compassionate, curious, calm, creative, caring. There's 12, I believe, C characteristics, and they're not listed here, but we can type them up in the comment later. So when a client struggles to ask their boss for time off, in IFS, a therapist would explore the various internal parts that might be involved in the situation, such as the part that fears rejection, parts that feel guilty about needing a break, or parts that might even be angry at the boss for creating a situation in which asking feels difficult. The therapist helps the client identify, understand, and unburden these parts. It's a term they use, unburden, allowing them to approach the situation from a more integrated and confident place. And we have here 5 key techniques that you will see in any IFS therapy sessions. Katie, would you like to read these key techniques? Can you see where it is?
Yeah. Yep. The first one is identifying parts. The therapist helps the client identify the different parts of themselves that have conflicted feelings or beliefs about asking for time off. Number two is unblending. The therapist supports the client in unblending from these parts so they can observe them without being overwhelmed by them, allowing the client's self to lead. Three, dialogue with parts. The therapist encourages the client to develop a compassionate dialogue with their parts, understanding their fears, motivations, and desires. Four, unburdening. Through self compassion, the therapist helps the client unburden parts that carry fear, guilt, or shame, freeing them to act more freely and confidently. Finally, five, self leadership. The ultimate goal is for the client to approach the situation from their core self, which is calm, confident, and capable of making decisions without being overly influenced by anxious or fearful parts.
So I guess to summarize, we identify parts so that we can unblend and locate the self, which is not a part, but it is like a conductor that leads the orchestra and all the instruments. When the self leads the orchestra, they play in harmony, and they get to the harmony by each of them unburdening the heavy load or grief or trauma that they carry, and it is done through this dialogue. I guess that's how we can connect the key techniques. And now ChatGPT has written out a dialogue. So like I said, take it with a pinch of salt, and if you're an IFS therapist, do comment and say what doesn't seem quite right. But essentially, this is what a session might look like. So Katie will play the role of the client. We're going to read it out, act it out if we can. And I'll play the role of a therapist. And we'll read out what the session might look in an IFS therapy session.
Okay, I think.
All right, you can start. Mm-hmm.
I think the client is first in this one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, okay, sounds good. I know I need a break, but I just can't ask my boss for time off. It feels overwhelming, like something bad will happen if I do.
It sounds like there are different parts of you that are reacting to the idea of asking for time off. Let's slow down for a moment. Can you notice which parts are coming up as you think about this situation?
Yeah, there's a part of me that feels scared, like I'll be judged or seen as weak if I ask for time off.
Okay, let's focus on that scared part for a moment. How do you feel toward that part of yourself that's feeling afraid right now?
I guess I'm frustrated with it. It's making everything harder.
That makes sense. Well, let's see if we can be curious about this part instead of frustrated. Can you take a deep breath and just notice this part without judgment? What does it want you to understand?
It feels small and vulnerable, like it's afraid of being rejected or looked down on. I think it's worried that my boss will think I'm not committed to my work.
That's an important fear to acknowledge. Let's appreciate that this part is trying to protect you in some way, maybe by keeping you from getting hurt or feeling rejected. Can you ask this part why it feels like asking for time off is dangerous?
Well, it says in the past, whenever I asked for something, it didn't go well. I think it's remembering how my parents used to get upset when I needed something. So now I feel like I'm bothering people whenever I ask for anything.
So, this part is carrying the burden of those early experiences with your parents. It believes that asking for anything like time off will lead to disappointment or anger from others. Can you ask this part how old it thinks you are when you feel this way?
It feels like I'm a little kid again, maybe 7 or 8 years old. It's like I'm asking my parents, not my boss.
That's valuable insight. This part is stuck in the past, responding to your boss as if they were your parents. Let's thank this part for trying to protect you and all these years. And even if it's been difficult, it's been doing its best to keep you safe, right?
Yeah, it's trying to help, even if it's making me anxious right now.
Exactly. Now let's see if we can unburden this part. Can you let it know that you're not 7 anymore and your boss isn't your parent? You're an adult now and you can handle the situation differently. What does this part need to feel more relaxed or reassured?
It says it needs to know that I won't be punished or rejected for asking what I need.
That's a reasonable request. Can yourself offer that reassurance, letting this part know that you're in charge now and that asking for time off is a reasonable adult thing to do? You're safe and your needs matter. How does the part respond to that?
It feels a bit calmer, like it's starting to trust that I'll be okay even if my boss doesn't react perfectly.
That's progress. The more you can reassure the part that you're capable of handling the situation, the less it will need to protect you by creating anxiety. Is there another part that's showing up around asking for time off?
Yeah, there's another part that feels guilty, like I don't deserve to rest. It's like if I take time off, I'm letting everyone down.
Let's turn to this guilt part. Can you ask it why it feels like you don't deserve the rest?
It says that I should always be working hard and not ask for anything, that it's selfish to ask for time off when there's so much to do.
It sounds like this part has taken on a belief that your worth is tied to constant productivity. Can you thank this part for trying to motivate you? It's working hard to make sure you're responsible, but maybe it's holding too much of that burden. Does that feel right?
Yeah, it's definitely trying to make me responsible, but it's also making me feel guilt for even thinking about time off.
Let's see if we can unburden this guilt. Can you let this part know that taking time off doesn't mean you're irresponsible? In fact, rest is a part of being responsible because it helps you stay healthy and effective. What does this part need in order to trust that?
Says it needs permission to take breaks, like it's waiting for someone to tell it that it's okay.
Can you give this part permission? Let it know that it's okay to rest and that you can be both responsible and deserving of a break.
I think I can. It's starting to feel like maybe I do deserve time off.
That's great. As we keep working with these parts, they'll trust you more to lead from a place of calm and self assurance. How does it feel right now thinking about asking your boss for time off?
It feels less scary, more like something I can handle. I don't feel so overwhelmed by fear or guilt.
That's wonderful to hear. We'll continue building this relationship with your parts, helping you approach challenges from a place of self leadership, where you can care for yourself and communicate your needs without being weighed down by fears or old guilt. How did it feel for you to read the part of the client and does it, I don't know, do you have a comment?
It feels familiar. It feels comfortable to read the part of the client. You know, I wish it was this smooth,
Yeah.
but it's such a good, it's just a good example though of even if just a piece of what was said was ever said in a therapy session, I think it's like a good way to show that like whatever the client presents, to be able to help the client see the different parts working is
Mm.
cool.
Yeah, as an illustration, it's helpful, but I remember from reading a transcript of IFS sessions that usually when you ask a part to speak, there's always like another part that says,
Mhm.
"Well, don't let this part speak because I know what it's going to say." And parts keep popping up, and you have to address the one that wants to speak first. So I guess that's one reason why it's not this smooth. You don't get to hear from the scared part that easily. You just hear from the like manager part. No, but there's no reason to be scared and rational. So that's one of the hurdles. And a lot of people need time here. This is obviously not the first session. People would need time to understand what you mean by parts and feel comfortable. And there was not really a pause here for to try maybe like the empty chair work where you talk to the part and get a sense for what it feels. But I mean, it's a ChatGPT dialogue. I don't know. I think people can say in the comments if it's helpful or not. It's not exactly how it is in session, but it's an
Yeah,
illustration.
it's a really good example, I think. Yeah, for sure. I like how you said that there's multiple parts and that part that wants to hold you back, I think is really powerful. It's just I don't know, it's hard how to identify that both as a client and a therapist. Maybe I don't know how a therapist would like notice that the client is holding something back or but anyway, yeah, just throwing out those thoughts too.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
really
because
yeah.
um, it depends if the therapy approach fights resistance or doesn't fight. I think Gestalt and other therapies and IFS, they don't fight this resistance. They notice it. Oh, so there's something that won't let you go there. And in IFS, they see this something as just another part. And they don't like, okay, but do it. They don't push
Mhm.
beyond what the client is showing. So they'll just go like, okay, so in other therapies, they may not call it, okay, this part is showing up, but they might notice this reluctance and like maybe just respect that. Or I guess in some therapies, they attack it and try to reason with it, which I'm not a big fan of. But yeah, that's great. Um, I hope that it helps somebody just maybe think differently if they're not familiar with this kind of work. There's a little summary. I don't know, maybe you could read the summary and then we'll close with that.
Yes, that sounds good. Sorry, I was scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to that.
As you're scrolling, I'll remind people to comment, especially if you know about IFS. Help us out. I'm not officially trained in IFS. It's not available in my country, but I have read books and I see that it's very similar to parts work in Gestalt and integrative therapy. Did you find the summary?
Yes, yes. Okay. In internal family systems, IFS, the therapist helps the client identify and connect with the different parts that are involved in their struggle to ask for time off. The client, in this example, recognizes the fearful child part that is stuck in the past, reacting to the boss as if they were a parent, and a guilt driven part that believes they don't deserve rest. The therapist guides the client in unblending from these parts, engaging with them from their core self, to offer reassurance and permission to rest. Through compassionate dialogue and unburdening, the client can approach the situation from a place of calm, clarity, and self compassion, leading to more effective and confident communication with their boss.
Yeah. In an ideal world, it happens within one session, but in real life, there's no way of knowing. All right, thank you so much. This has been about
Thank you.
17, 15 minutes or so. Hopefully, it's not been too long, but it's been informative, and I'll see you for another approach sometime soon.
Yes, thank you. Bye
Bye.
bye.